Hello and welcome to this first episode of Uplift Around Us, a roundtable discussion show about sexual well-being and gender identity. My name is Michael and I'll be your host for today. Joining me is Grace Miller.
Hey.
And Jennifer Dorsey.
Hello.
All right. And so what the show is going to be is we're just going to talk about some of the current events going on today with, those topics, starting with changes to Title IX, the rolling back some of the guidelines related to sexual assaults on college campuses. Grace, can you explain, what Title IX is, what changes are going on, and what college students and grads can do to protect themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So Title IX is it's a non-discrimination policy, basically. And what the Obama administration did was they wrote a Dear Colleague letter in 2011, which described how they would like Title IX to be implemented when it came to sexual assault and sexual harassment on campuses. So the Obama administration saw that sexual assault and sexual harassment as a gendered issue. And that meant that it fell under Title IX's protections. And as a part of that letter, they wrote out all of the different things that a school would do, like have a Title IX officer on campus available to students, ensure that a student felt comfortable on campus after an assault, ensure that due process was in place. And it also, most notably and most controversially, set the burden of proof in the context of a case with any university against an accused assailant to be lower than the criminal level. So that meant that it needed to be more likely than not that an assault occurred for a university to then take action against that assailant. What Betsy DeVos in particular honed in on about that was that many accused assailants saw this as just too low of a burden, saw that they were not able to they felt as if they were not able to defend themselves to the extent or have enough doubt to the extent that they had an equal say in that process. So Betsy DeVos recently said that the Trump administration was planning on rescinding that guidance. So to be clear, as of now, the Title IX protections are still in place, but it's clear that those up top aren't planning on ensuring that those restrictions are enforced to the extent the Obama administration was, which means as of now, much of the organizing that's happened around this issue has been contacting universities and colleges and encouraging them to continue to implement those Title IX era policies. And I've seen this most particularly from Know Your Nine, which is knowyourix.org. They're an incredible organization that is really utilizing online organizing to make this happen, where they have developed action items for folks to do sample letters, for example, as well as great resource sheets for folks to use to reach out. And this online organizing piece is so important, particularly since it gives alumni the ability to still be plugged into this work, to still be able to reach out to their schools and make clear to them what's important to them. And so many schools rely so heavily on alumni involvement and support, particularly financial support, that if alumni make clear that this is a priority to them, then it really can make a difference on those college campuses.
So, Jen, were you about to say something?
No, I was just going to say that a lot of this now comes down to universities stepping up and taking a stand that they're not going to let their standards slide. And some universities are starting to show signs that they're going to try not to, but it's really important that, and a lot of the efforts through Know Your Nine are in this area, but it's really important that students alumni really continue to put that pressure on the universities because it is so much on them. And I think that's what folks don't realize is, yes, you can continue to pressure the Department of Education to not continue to roll back these provisions. But in the end, it comes down to right now, the most actionable thing is keeping universities from going backwards in their own right. And, I think that's where a lot of the decision making is happening right now, and that's where a lot of the concerns are, the most heavy. So it's really important for people to see what they can do on their kind of, it's like local politics, it's local level kind of thing.
All right. So you mentioned that it's at this point, the sort of like the burden is on, colleges individually. What can sort of students do as individuals other than, try, like how you mentioned with, Know Your Nine, what can students do to sort of make sure that, colleges still protect them, or can students protect themselves, or does it can it go outside of the sort of college system or into like greater the greater judicial system?
Well, students have I did a lot of sexual assault organizing when I was on my undergrad campus, and what I found so empowering about that was the opportunity to really deeply investigate how my school was keeping with Title IX policies. So we did a lot of work with, I was part of a task force, so we did a lot of work really investigating how the sexual assault process was occurring, how easy it was for us to find our Title IX coordinator, and then sitting down with administrative officials as they would sit down with us and talk to them about what we as students were seeing the process as, and providing them with actionable steps and resources that we felt were necessary in order to keep students safe on campus. So that kind of organizing is high level and deeply important. And that was happening during the time when Title IX was still being actively enforced by the Obama administration. Like, it's important to know that even though there's obviously a difference in whether or not these two presidential administrations approve of these guidelines, even so, universities have not historically been great with implementing them to the letter. So that's important to know, is that there has constantly been organizing around this topic. And so while now it's certainly a different political environment nationally, on the individual level, the same type of work has already been happening. It can continue to happen. So if there are any students who are interested in getting involved with that, I would encourage them to look into what has already been done. And if nothing has been done, to feel free to look into what other college campuses students have done and take that as a blueprint or as inspiration for how they can implement that on their own campus.
Yeah, when I was in college, I too was very heavily involved in the advocacy around sexual assault and resources. And one of the things that was big during the years I was there was we were advocating for a sexual assault resource center, and to have a full-time staff member there who could help advocate for students and help provide resources, because your only real resources were the dean of students and public safety while we were there. And that, I mean, there were some upsides to that, and there definitely were supportive people on both of those, in both of those organizations, but it still wasn't enough, and it didn't help enough. And one of the big things we finally got as I was leaving my university was the resource center and a full-time staffer, and it's grown since then. And that allowed people to have a resource for them to go to if they didn't know what to do, if they didn't know if they wanted to press charges or wanted to deal with the university system, or if they just wanted to know where to go to for medical assistance. And it's a lot more comfortable to be able to do it that way than have to call your public safety officer, and it's those kind of changes. That's just an example. And many universities have done something similar, because we were working off of models from other universities. And so like you said, Grace, look at what other universities have done. Find student organizations on your campus that are already trying to advocate for this, because many campuses already have these kinds of student groups that are looking to make these changes, and really see what your rights are, and know what your rights are, and meet with the administration, insist that they meet with you. And then if they don't meet with you, go to your student newspaper and tell them, because that kind of pressure is important too. And that kind of pressure was a big deal when we went through it, because it would get picked up in local news too, because they wanted to see that our voices weren't being heard. So.
Yeah, and I want to encourage, totally along with that, what Jennifer is saying, is the way in which folks are able to raise ruckus about it can really make a difference. And I would really encourage folks not to underestimate the importance of alumni ruckus too. So I know I already said it, but just like to really drive the point home, particularly with utilizing what resources are available virtually, the Alumni Network is a great way to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Have you heard of any, some of the big universities, Harvard, MIT, et cetera? Do you know if they released any statements saying we're still going to support Title IX thing, or we're going to cut all Title IX protections? Have you heard anything from that either way?
I do believe that Yale issued a statement just saying that Yale would work closely with Betsy DeVos, which is not far enough as we would hope.
Yeah.
It's not the best statement in the world in terms of the encouraging side.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard a ton. So I know I've heard of some universities here and there saying they were still going to support students, but very vague statements.
All right. Well, hopefully, we could, sort of keep some of those protections and keep the pressure on the universities. So second part, part of the discussion today is something that's just, just broke this morning, is Screen Junkies, one of their, founders, Andy Signore, was just suspended for sexual harassment allegations. And Jen, what basically was, what have been the allegations? What has been the response from Screen Junkies, and what has been sort of the responses from his accusers?
Sure. So basically, 2 accusations came out through social media from 2 different women that said that basically he tried to force them to participate in sexual activities, and that he made inappropriate comments. Emma Bauer is one of the women, and she basically said that he made inappropriate comments to her, including one about masturbating over photos of her in front of her. So, incredibly inappropriate. And then it basically also said that he tried to sexually assault. I'm sorry. I'm confused. Emma Bauer was the inappropriate comments. And then April Dawn was flown out to Los Angeles to appear on Screen Junkies. And she said that he attempted to sexually assault her. So the 2 different women. And the details are available online in depth, because April Dawn actually did a long screenshot of her story on Twitter, so you can see the details. But she also her boyfriend, April Dawn, also worked at the site, and he threatened Andy Signore, threatened to fire her boyfriend if she spoke out. So, particularly 2 very difficult really bad cases here. And both of them have said, or at least one, if not both of them, have said that they've tried to work with the HR department. The HR department has been unresponsive, basically, and not helpful in this case. And so they've both come out publicly now, and kind of right on the tails of the after the Harvey Weinstein case came out into the news, and so there were women coming out, obviously, in that case. And so I think it's important, and Grace and I were speaking about this earlier, is that women are more likely, well, victims in general, but in this case, women are more likely to come out and speak against their the people who hurt them when others have come out as well, because of a variety of reasons. But there's more likely, they feel like they're more likely to be believed. Whether that's always the case is up in the air, but they also, there's strength in numbers in terms of support systems, and they also have the ability to feel like they're not alone in general. So it's not surprising that it came right after the Harvey Weinstein accusations came out. And it's really, this in particular, given this is a YouTuber or a YouTube company, it's a pattern that is particularly disturbing, and nowhere near, the only, obviously. And so I'm grateful that the women came out. I hope there are no more, but anything's possible. And I hope that they're able to actually get some justice out of this. But it's really concerning that these patterns just won't break.
Why do you think that these patterns, because we've seen this, like you mentioned, like with the accusations like against like Alex Day and a few other YouTube personalities. Why do you think that these patterns are? Why haven't they broke? Or what's causing them? Is it just sort of like a lack of respect between creator and their audience, or what's your opinion on this?
Oh gosh, I think there's so many reasons. I mean, some of it comes to larger cultural issues in general, and that toxic masculinity, the need to have a sense of control. And I think when you're running something like a YouTube channel, you have more of a sense of power. And so that sense of needing more control, it deepens it. When we've looked at cases from the past, like you said, Alex Day, Alex Carpenter, others, you're really looking at a fan-creator relationship that is, again, very much about the power, very much about the need to feel like you're taking control over your audience, and you have the ability to do whatever you want, basically. And these women, in most cases, young women, are just open to whatever, because they're in this place where they're in the lower end of the power dynamic, and they have a lot less control over the situation, and they are being manipulated by someone who is, in a sense, in a power position. And it's really just a very unhealthy, very very difficult dynamic. And I think that that's why you see it, is because YouTube is a place where people have that power dynamic naturally set. And so they take it too far, and they take it to a place that can be, whether it's sexual harassment or sexual assault or anything pretty much in that spectrum. It's it's too prevalent. But I think that's a big part of it, is the power dynamic. Grace, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think you touched on a lot of it. I think what's difficult about this specific situation is that it is coming in the light of the Harvey Weinstein allegations. And I think we see patterns throughout that with the men in power in the media industry taking advantage of that. And we also see patterns within the YouTube community, like you were just talking about, Jennifer. And I think what's so important now is to see the way in which the community responds. And what heartens me, what I find heartening, is the way in which he was immediately suspended following those Twitter allegations. And while clearly, according to those allegations, that should have happened long ago, the fact that something has happened now is better than nothing. And I can't believe that is where I am at. As long as any sort of action in this sort of case is good.
Yep.
And so I'm glad to see that. And I see this kind of, we haven't, another case maybe to also bring into this conversation is the recent one with Nick at Polygon, where a popular Polygon host had a number of allegations come out against him, and he took a step back and was suspended, let go from Polygon, that multi-channel network. And I think that is amazing too, to see the way in which I was very impressed with the way in which that organization responded to those allegations, and how quickly that person was removed from their crew. And if it continues to, if that is a new pattern among organizations, video creating organizations on the internet, that would be amazing.
That's for sure.
Right. So maybe, perhaps, because, organizations like Polygon and Screen Junkies, because they're operating on this smaller online level where online communities can be so quick to organize, maybe a new thing that we're seeing is less tolerance for sexual assault allegations if they're brought publicly. And that would be a good thing, but also maybe a bad thing if they would only react if brought publicly.
Right.
So that's something just to watch out for.
Yeah, because I saw, Screen Junkies does Honest Trailers on YouTube, which is a very popular series. And I saw, I checked out, before we started recording, one of their most recent videos, and it seemed like their community was pretty quick to be like, hey, this guy, he's got to go. This isn't acceptable. So.
That's encouraging. And I do really hope that, the community response is so important. And that's what was so important, a few years ago when all of the YouTuber allegations were coming out. And not only was it response against the YouTubers, but it was rallying for the survivors. And that is so important too, because, we live in a culture where survivors are doubted no matter what, and in so many ways. And it's really important that the communities support the people who are willing to come forward. And I'm hoping that in these cases too, that continues, because it's not easy to come out publicly about these things. And especially when that, public opinion isn't always on your side.
I think one reason why we're seeing this increased community response against the, in support of the survivor, is I think partially because our online communities are growing up. Mm-hmm. They're aging up. Instead of previously where many of the fans and fan communities were primarily 18 and under, not exclusively, but primarily. That meant that when an allegation was coming forward, those folks just genuinely did not have the life experience, the knowledge to understand the gravity, the larger social situation surrounding those events, and therefore are more likely to back up the person who they love, their icon, their YouTuber, But now that we're in a place where both the fans have grown up and have more knowledge about that, but also the industry has grown up, I think we're seeing more of a response to that. YouTubers are less and less likely to be independent and more and more likely, like Nick from Polygon, like this latest Screen Junkies incident, are more likely to be part of a larger organization that has a PR. It has PR and like has a need to ensure that they as an organization can be trusted. And I think that is a good thing because there are more players in the game who understand the game, and there are more not to talk down about the value of society and social dynamics, but there are more people involved who understand what's happening, and there are more people involved who can step in and make that stand, right? Part of the reason why Uplift formed was because there weren't enough people in the community that could make a difference, right? YouTubers felt like they couldn't step in. YouTube felt that they couldn't step in. Multi-channel networks were not as powerful of players. Yeah. So the fact that we wanted to step in to try and build up those pieces and try to get those pieces involved as arbitrators, right, in the community to ensure that there was some sort of way that the community was kept in check and kept healthy and safe. And I think now we're seeing a natural growth of those players.
That's a really good point.
That is. Yeah. Okay, and last topic, we're going to quickly touch on is Cam Newton of the Carolina Panthers in a recent press conference made some pretty silly statements towards a female sports journalist, saying that I believe the exact quote was, it was funny that a female was talking about routes, which is a pretty basic thing about football and a silly comment to make when a sports reporter probably knows what routes are. And I was just thinking that it's like in a predominantly like male fandom, and sports is a fandom, whether or not you want to think about it, is kind of where. And I was just wondering what you guys thought of how women can sort of not necessarily protect themselves, but feel more comfortable in what is a primarily male dominated fandom, but like sports journalism.
It's funny because it feels like a direct correlation to the gamer community in so many ways, because it's the same kind of attitude in that, or also the comics community. Those two communities, especially online, you see that they're like, oh, a woman doesn't know this about this. Like, obviously not. What are you talking about? And it's so prevalent, and it's back to the toxic masculinity thing, in that it's this idea that these male dominated fields means that women can't possibly participate in an equal level at them, or that they can't possibly know what they're talking about in them without a man teaching them those things. Or that in some cases, especially we've seen this in the gamer community because it's very toxic, is that women participating is actually a threat to the community, and that it's and then therefore it can become violent and can become very aggressive against women. And so I think it's fascinating that it feels like a direct correlation in a lot of ways. And in that case, I mean, I saw the video of Cam Newton. I'm just like, dude, it was even the way he said it. He said it in the most like degrading way. He's like, oh.
Yeah, it was like a stand-up comedian, or like, oh, hey, it's punchline time, and then everyone was just like, wait, what? We're like, that's a legitimate question that the reporter asked.
Right, and she even went up to him as he was leaving the locker rooms after, and he didn't apologize from that. He only just recently apologized all of a sudden because some of his sponsors dropped him.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. So I think one of the Greek yogurt companies dropped him, and someone else. So he just put out a apology that sounds very and his either manager or owner or someone up there put out a statement that said that they didn't support what he said. And so I think there was a lot of pressure on him to say something. he said he quote, extremely degrading and disrespectful choice of words, which I agree with that. I don't know if he actually agrees with that.
Yeah. Was that just like written up by like, the Panthers, like, lawyer or something like that? It's like, here, say this.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah. Especially, I mean, it's not the first time that he said something ridiculous, but this is just, and I think it's really important for women to continue to speak up in these communities. If they feel like they belong, and they need to be, heard just as much. And it's even more important to me is that male members of the communities are standing up for the women in the communities when this stuff happens, and are helping them to feel more welcome, because their voices have more weight in those spaces. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jay. And I would love to tie that back to the online, and by seeing the way in which the story is played out online, just like we were talking about with with everything we were just talking about, the previous topic, a lot of that action happened on Twitter. And similarly here, the reporter who had those comments said about her spoke out on Twitter and posted something on Twitter almost as one of the first ways in which she responded to that. And I think that's so amazing to see the way in which the online has become such an important part of the way in which folks respond to and almost publicly announce these extremely important things, right? People coming forward on Twitter to explain their experience with assault and harassment, people coming forward on Twitter to speak out against somebody saying degrading comments about them. And I think that's also can be tied back to the work of our dear friends over at Hollaback, who are really encouraging people who are experiencing any sort of violence on the streets to document that and to form a community of people who are supporting each other who have experienced similar things. So Hollaback is a platform in which that happens for street harassment. And I think we're also seeing that organically online on Twitter, with people feeling confident enough to push that out there. Because clearly, as we know, there are also people being very abusive, being trolls or harassing folks on Twitter. But clearly, overall, the impact so far from those specific instances have been positive. And I think that that's extremely important, particularly when we look at the national level with the way in which Twitter is being used by our president as well, right? It's just amazing the way in which Twitter has now been solidified as a key defining factor of the time that we're in now.
Though it's funny, total side note, only like 20 to 25% of Americans are on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So I have a feeling the number is going to start to go up over the next couple of years. But it's interesting because these arguments play out on Twitter, and only a quarter, not even a quarter of the population is on it. And so it's fascinating because obviously Facebook has its own issues in its own right, but there are more people on it. Yet Twitter has become this megaphone platform for pretty much any social issue you could possibly need to talk about, or any grievance or anything like that. And it speaks a lot to who is on that platform and what they're doing on the platform. And I mean, some people have multiple, accounts on there, and there's a lot of organizational accounts on there. So it can be very a mishmash, but and plus you can be anonymous on Twitter, much more so than on almost any other platform. And so there's a lot of power to that, both on the positive and negative side. There's anonymity can be good just as much as it can be bad. But I agree. I think it's really interesting to see how it played out there, and how a lot of the public pressure came from the internet. I mean, as to most things now, the internet is a place where you can get in trouble just as much as you can be praised in like a heartbeat. So.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael.
Go ahead. I'll wrap up with with you.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say, I agree totally, Jennifer. I think that's a great point about how such a small slice of the population is actually online. And I would point out too that when we think about teens and the way that they're growing up, now within this time, many parents are scared of that, are scared of their teens growing up inside this new frontier. And what I find, what I just want to end with is the way in which I think we're going to continue to grow and continue expanding in the exact way that you're talking about. And I am optimistic for the future. And I hope that other folks can be too, because I think while we're seeing some really scary, terrible incidents being reported on Twitter, I think the way in which Twitter has helped people mobilize for good is a good.
Agreed.
That's a very good, very optimistic point to end on. So thank you very much, Grace and Jen, for joining me today for this discussion. I hope to be do this on YouTube Live for the next episode. So if you have any comments or questions for us for the next episode, be sure to leave them in the comments, and we'll see if we can get you featured on the next episode of Uplift Around Us. So once again, Jen, Grace, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you. And we'll see you all next time on the next episode. Thank you very much.